Okay, welcome back to the bench. Today we're going to start working on the SCX-10 3 Jeep Wrangler. We're going to make a one-to-one that resembles my wife's Jeep Wrangler, 2014 Jeep Wrangler. If you've seen my first introduction video, you will see a small video there of what it looks like and what we're going to try to accomplish with this build. Okay, so the first thing we have to build is the axles. And this will be the first time I've ever built portal axles. So that would be interesting to get more of an idea of what and how these axles work. One of the things about building your own kit, I mean, everybody ought to think about doing this. It's not difficult. There's plenty of videos online to tell you how to do things. It's a good way to learn the workings of your RC, and if it breaks, you'll have a much easier time fixing it. Okay, so we have to have bag A. Makes sense. We'll start with A. Bag A here is the axle parts. If you've seen my builds before, I like to use a towel to put my parts on, that way they don't roll away. And it makes it easy to see, especially if it's a white towel. I use it in a light brown towel, I like it too. And bag A. We have the axle housings, which are somewhat already put together. That's interesting. That's different. A lot of different things going on with this kit, which might make it easier to work. Especially the fact that the body's already cut. Looks like some of the other stuff is already ready to go for you. Okay, they give you black grease and some thread lock. Thread lock is used whenever you're doing metal on metal. We'll talk about that as we go. Okay, so bag A1 it says. So we'll open up this bag, and bag A1 is inside of it. And bag A1 are gears. Bag A3 are bearings. And A2 and A4 are axles and hardware. Alright, screws. So we start with bag A1. We have bag A1 right here. We have all of our gears. All metal. Nice. Axial is doing it right. Everything is metal. Okay. We'll take this gear here. And this part here. And we will be bolting them together. And here we have metal on metal, so we will be using thread lock. Thread lock is basically helps keep the metal or the screws from coming undone in the or during the running of the vehicle. But you can still take them apart. With the red thread lock. There are other color thread locks that do not do that. Kind of like this little container here. I've been using, my thread lock is in a bigger container. I usually put it in a on something and then touch the screws to it. Okay, A4 bag of screws. And in this case, we need some M2 8mm. So we find M2 8s, and luckily they are very small. And the drawings have something you can compare the size to, in case you're not sure which are which. A little dab of thread lock. And a little dab of thread lock doesn't want to come out. There we go. Okay, so a little dab, you don't need much. One drop is plenty on each screw. And you should always check to make sure that when you're putting these things together, that you orient what you're working on with the picture. Picture can think 1,000 words. Picture says 1,000 words, whatever that saying is. Picture's worth 1,000 words. And then sometimes you'll wish you had paid attention. You don't have to hurry these. There's no big hurry. This is supposed to be a hobby, not a job. So you just take your time and learn the vehicle as you go. And then when you're finished, you have a very beautiful product, and then you can play with it. Me, personally, driving a vehicle is okay. That's not my passion. My passion is building vehicles. I will always buy a kit if it's possible. I just love putting them together. I have made from scratch vehicles. I have 3 of them that I have completely built, designed and built myself. I have a monster truck. I have a Formula off-road truck, and I have a rock bouncer. And I designed and built all 3 of those. And I learned just from doing kits. I got a couple of Axial kits to start with. Actually, my first kit was a Team Associated kit back in the 90s. And since then, I have my biggest fun just building the vehicles. taking my time, making sure everything's right, and building them. Like I say, I like building them from scratch, designing and building them. I've also liked building one-on-ones. I have 3 of those. 1 complete, 2 that are in processing. I just dropped a screw. Something the old 65-year-old fingers will do quite often. Lost my chain of thought. Anyway, that's not the correct screw that I dropped. I'll find it in a minute. But I built one-to-ones. I finished one. I built a 2012 Dodge Ram. You can see all these videos on my YouTube channel. The Ram was a one-on-one of the Ram I owned until I just traded it in and bought a Ford F-250. Now, and in 1996 I had a Toyota 4Runner off-road truck, and I built one. I'm building, I should say, a one-to-one for it. I got everything finished. I just need to do the paint. I also have a video up on how I match the paint. So, like I said, this is the hobby for me, and yeah, it's something I really like to do. Okay, there's one now. We will build the second one also while we're doing this one. And at this time, I will not bore you with watching me put another one together. So I will shut the camera off and finish this one, and then we'll get back at it. Okay, we finished both locker assemblies. Now it says to work on the front third member installation. Okay, for this we also need 2 bearings. Bag A3 has the bearings. And the bearings again are, there's a size chart for the bearing. This is not the greatest of starts here. Oh, there it is. I thought, man, there's a bearing missing. Alright. So, we're going to be doing the front assembly. Front assembly. Axle. Housing. And why they put this on here, I don't know. I guess so it won't get lost. Tight fit. Okay. These are not split housings. That's kind of cool. I like that. Alright. So the first thing we do is put in a AX31407. That was a bearing. Then is the drive pinion, drive gear. Then it says put black grease on the, and I'm going to use their grease. I usually use Udder Butter, a grease that I got from Cow RC. But I'm going to build this completely stock to start with, from the parts that they give me. And then from there, we'll do modifications later, if we must. We will. Because I'm not going to leave it stock. It's going to end up looking like my wife's Jeep. And to make it look like my wife's Jeep, it can't be stock. Because my wife's Jeep is not stock. Okay, so we drop the gear in. The lockers. And that's all there is to it. That's pretty simple. Pretty nice, actually. Okay, put the differential cover back on. Four screws. Hold it on. N25 18mm. Long screws. Now, I have a screwdriver, electric screwdriver, that I'm tempted to use, but there's always a possibility of stripping out plastic and plastic, or metal into plastic screws. It just is not a smart idea to run them in fast and then discover you stripped it out. Or maybe if I'm in a hurry trying to replace a part out in the field, I might use it. But on the initial build, everything is done by hand tightened. That way we make sure that everything's going straight. We're not stripping any screws. And we are building up our hand, our wrist. I do have to admit, this will be my third Axial. I built the SCX-10 2. I built the new SMT-10. And now the SCX-10 3. And so far, I have not been disappointed. The builds go together quite well. Everything is beautifully manufactured. I mean, Axial takes their time to make sure things are right. And this one looks like it's even better than before. It looks to me like, and I may be wrong, but I'll find out as we keep going, a lot of stuff is not on trees. Man, when stuff comes on trees like this, you gotta cut them, trim them, all that stuff. Everything looks like it's already been cut. It's been molded, maybe by themselves instead of on trees. So, I don't know. Okay, that was pretty straightforward. That part. Okay, now we need to build the portal knuckle. quarter knuckle assembly for the front. Again, these parts are not on a tree. They're already individual parts. Alright. So at this point, we would take the knuckle assembly, housing, and place two different sized bearings into the housing. That is not the right one. It's bigger. One big bearing, one of the biggest of the bearings. And that is one tight fit. Like I said before, man, Axial don't have no problem with tolerances. They like to make things nice and tight. Then a second bearing inside the housing. If you don't lay those bearings flat, they don't want to go in. Having a nice tight fit is great. Getting the bearing, you got to have it flat. Alright, after that you need two different gears. There's two, a big one and a small one. And you need a short shaft, which is in bag A2. All the axle shafts. Everything is metal. I like that, except for the housings. Okay, so one axle shaft, short shaft, one gear, a pin to hold the gear in the back of the shaft, fits in the slot in the gear, some black grease on the gear. You don't need to go crazy with the grease. You can actually put too much grease in and it'll bind things. So don't go crazy. On that we will put another we need to put bearings in the other part of the housing. Again, if you're not sure which bearings you need, there's a little chart here that tells you which size bearings you need. Then we put the shaft inside the upper bearing, and then we place the two housings together with the bearings, bring the shaft through, and I got it the wrong way. Should have put it in this part of the housing. I don't know what I was thinking about. I had a housing in my hand, but it wasn't the right one. All right. Really not that difficult. Of quite easy to do. And then 4 screws to hold the housing together. Alright, last screw. Again, when you are building, you're putting these metal screws into plastic, and this is not a cheap plastic, this is a really good plastic. It's a polymer, more like a, not really plastic per se. Just don't over tighten them. There's no reason to crank down on them. When you feel them tighten up, just give them a little quarter turn after that and you're good to go. They're not going to come out. Okay, so there is the knuckle assembly. I'll do the other one off camera and then we'll be back. Okay, now we have both knuckles built. We're going to put the front axle knuckle installation. So we take the axle housing with our differential gears and make sure we orient the knuckles the correct way. First thing we would do is put a bearing, excuse me, in the end of the housing. Slide the axle shaft into the housing, into the correct side of the housing, long and short, of course. We'll do the long side first. Okay. Take the knuckle, place the outer shaft into the knuckle. And this could be difficult or it could be easy. Right now the paper's sticking to me. All right. Then, let's make sure we got the right knuckle in the right place. Oh, that's right. Okay. I don't think it'll go in the wrong way. Then we have these little screws that have threads halfway up that hold the knuckle to the housing, drive shaft housing. Lining up the holes that you can't see. This is where you wish you had that third hand right in the middle of your chest to hold one thing, hold two things, and then put the screw on. That is a tight fit. So I'm going to pre-screw this screw into the knuckle a little ways just to get a thread started so it's easier to line up the holes. You don't want to pre-thread it all the way, just enough to get it started. And of course it's on an angle, the angle of the dangle, as they say. Okay, you don't want to tighten those up too much. If you tighten those up too far, it turns very, very difficultly. So we'll back off on them a little bit because I did. Depends on how easily you want it to turn. Not a pretty strong servo for this, so I'm gonna think about that later. All right, now the short shaft on the other end. Again, this time I'm going to pre-thread both of these holes. Well, I know one thing, if you want to, you can keep the slop out of the front end by tightening these up just a little more than you need to. Alrighty then. Front done. And they're working. All right, rear axle. A little bit more, or less I should say, demanding, since it's pretty much just a straight shaft, straight axle going out to the portals. So first we'll put a bearing in the bottom of the axle housing. Place the that wasn't then place the pinion in. Put some grease on the spur, rear end gear. Place it in the housing. And put the differential cover on. Okay, got the differential cover on. Put the bearings in the portal. Alright, got the bearings in the portal. And then we will put the, probably help if I turn the page. I've got a picture and I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. So again, we got the two short shafts, gear, pin, and this drops into the bottom of the housing. I put some bearings on this end. Okay, there is no bearing in where the axle goes. So the axle goes in first. The gear goes on that. The shaft with the gear and the grease. And I dropped the pin. Okay. With a little bit of struggling and not understanding portal axles, you place a bearing inside the axle housing, one bearing. You place the axle inside of the housing to the differential. You place the small gear with a square hole onto that axle. You take the shaft, short shaft, place the gear on there, place the pin through the shaft to hold the gear in place. Put a little grease on the gear. Place the gear in the housing into the hole where the bearing is, and then place the cover with the two bearings over the top of the house, or the portal housing. And this one does not want to fit. Okay, these covers that go onto the portals, there are two different ones. One has a number 2 and one has a number 1. A set of them has a number 1 and a set of them has a number 2. According to the directions, the 2 goes on the rear and the 1 goes on the front. Well, both will fit on the front, but ones will not fit on the rear. So I have to take off the one that's on the front, the 2 that's on the front, and replace it with a 1. Okay, to further explain, in the directions they have a picture of this housing cover for the portal. There's a number 2 in the bottom, in this part of the housing. The number 2s go on the rear, and the other picture on the front axle is a 1. I had a number 1 left over and a 2, so I accidentally put a 2 on the front axles. That will work, but the 2 on the rear axle, or the 1 on the rear axle, will not work. So it has to be a number 2. Pay attention to the instructions, I tell myself, and then it fits perfectly. Okay, rear axle finished, front axle finished, nice and smooth, nice and smooth. First time I ever built portal axles. Not difficult. A few more gears and a few more things than straight axles, but supposedly it gives you more ground clearance. Of course, you got drop down for the outer shafts, so it only would give you more ground clearance. You don't see these on a lot of vehicles. I seen a Jeep out overlanding one time that had them in the real world. So that's it for today, guys. Next we will tackle the shocks. Probably one of my least favorite things to do. I think I remember that. All right, have a good day. Thanks for watching.